Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's the Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 245. And welcome. It's the Analytics Power Hour. It's an advice show for the modern data professional. This is going to be fun. We asked all of you to send in your questions, and send them in you did. So on this episode, I'm joined by all of my co-hosts to answer some of these questions. I've been told that this show in particular, we will be taking very seriously. So none of the traditional banter and humor will be allowed. So in no particular order, let me introduce myself. I'm Michael Helbling. I also have co-hosts, the awesome and talented Julie Hoyer. Welcome, Julie.
Hello.
Awesome.
How are you?
Remember,
we're not even 2 minutes in.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think the laugh track is a little premature, but let me introduce the quintessential analyst, Tim Wilson. Welcome, Tim.
All right.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
At this point, we're like a traveling circus. All right. The wise Mo Kiss. Welcome, Mo.
Hi, folks.
And, of course, the convivial and clever Val Kroll. Welcome, Val.
Did ChatGPT write this intro, Michael?
No, I actually did Google synonyms for friendly and smart to get the alliteration. Yes.
I like it.
All right. Well, okay. Supposedly we all know the format, but let's just review. We have listener recorded questions. We'll play one, and then we'll all make fun of Tim's answer for a few minutes. I mean, we will all answer and figure out, we'll have some thoughts on some of the questions. So let's see where this goes. Before we start, we all want to give a huge thank you and shout out to all the listeners who submitted questions. We couldn't possibly include them all, but we deeply appreciate all of them nonetheless. Let's do this. Let's get to our first question.
Hi, my name is Lori, and I'm calling from St. Louis, Missouri. My question for you is, how do you know when an analysis is good enough? I work for an agency, so it's very fast-paced, and often the time that I can spend on any given analysis depends on what else I've got in my queue. But I always feel like it needs just a little more time. I think the most influential piece in my thinking about this is Tim's blog post on assumptions. And just the idea of deciding when you have turned enough data stones and when it's time to stop turning them over. I really like the idea of calling those out as limitations, but I'm wondering if you have any advice for determining when you have turned enough data stones. I think that sometimes I operate out of fear that someone's going to poke holes in my analysis, and that's really not the best way to be creative and to think about things. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering if you all have any advice. Thank you so much.
So to be clear, Lori read Tim's content and walked away with more questions than answers.
Well, in an agency environment, the first thing you do is you work on it until you're out of billable hours for that particular task. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. That's a joke. Please do not do that. That's not a recommendation. All right, Tim, what's the answer?
But she did say the word.
Oh, go ahead, Julie. Sorry.
I was going to say, she did say the one word that came to mind for me first, which was assumptions. And my kind of thing is like, once you start to build up too many assumptions, like you're going down a path of an analysis. And if you're making assumptions for your stakeholder, to me, that's my sign of like, I need to pause and stop. Because even though you may think, oh, I feel like maybe I don't have enough to take to them of a story, depending on how open-ended or vague this question or request was, unfortunately we fall into that trap a lot. Yeah, if I have to start making assumptions for my stakeholder and what they want and to determine which direction or how much further I go, that's usually when I say I need to probably pause where I'm at and check in with them.
See, I don't know. I feel like maybe I have a different approach, and it might be very internal, I suppose, specific. But part of it is like, at what point do we have enough information to make a decision? If we had more data, would it possibly change the decision we're going to make? And so like for me, a lot of it is like the timeliness and the impact or size of the decision that we have to make. So like, oh, Tim's like screwing his face up already. But I don't know if that's because I'm in, client side, it's very different, right? You're close to your stakeholders, and sometimes you're like, okay, I know that they're going to make a call on this by 10 a.m. Wednesday. So like, I've got to do what I can by then. And potentially, like, if it was a huge decision, I would push back if we didn't have enough information. But generally speaking, like, it's the stakeholder reality that caused me to stop or start. All right, everybody, pack on.
No. I mean, what I was listening to that, like, because to me, what I was hearing, like, the word that popped out to me was fear. Like, and I think I definitely identify with the fear, because say that's like, oh, they have to make a decision Wednesday morning, so I need to give them enough by Tuesday afternoon. And the fear is that you say, I think I've given you enough. And they say, oh, but what about?
Yeah.
And that was a stone that you didn't turn over.
Yes.
And that's kind of the balancing act. But I think, Julie, your point, I was thinking, like, when you start to make those assumptions, that's the opportunity to reach back out and say, hey, here's what I've done. Like there's, which I think, Mo, your point is great. It's a lot easier if it's an internal Slack, or you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm working on this. One, you're just letting them know you're working on it, but also say, I could go down this path. It's gonna take me some time. You know, it might mean tomorrow instead of this afternoon. And that is a little tougher in an agency, but I love that she's like, I don't think it's right to be operating out of fear. Like, that's a nerve-wracking way to go.
Julie, I'm reminded, this is probably like the third episode where I'm bringing this up, but the approach document that you worked on with Ryan and Sam to kind of outline, like, what are some of the risks that we already foresee, like getting clarity up front about what data sources we're using, what time period, and just so that you're really starting from that foundation of understanding and like opening those doors of communication for what you just called out, Tim. But yeah, again, like, and that was helping it frame as a hypothesis, because that's also helps it get really clear as to like, how do we know we have enough to help validate the question that was at hand. So, but yeah, I'm just going to keep mentioning that because that was just such a beautiful document you put together.
Nice.
Can we rewind, though, on that fear component? Because now that Tim's brought it up, I can't, like, unthink about it. Is this something that all analysts face? I'm thinking of a very specific situation where I did a piece of analysis. I didn't, like, there was a pretty tight time frame. It wasn't impossible, but, like, it was pretty tight. And I had to make an assumption at one point of, like, a particular rate. It was like adoption rate or something like that. And at my last company, our leadership were all like ex-consulting. So like they went through every single line and would be like, why'd you make this assumption, this one? And like, at some point I had to be like, you know, this is what it was on other devices. And like, and I gave my reasoning and he was like, well, I don't agree with it. And here are all the reasons why. And I'm like, okay, well, we can change it. But I remember having this like really visceral reaction to it of like, oh, I've really fucked up here. And is part of this like evolution as an analyst, just realizing like you have to make assumptions or you have to sometimes do something at 80%. And it's not actually like, I think the fear is very natural, but it's about learning ways for you to be comfortable with it. Because guess what? We can't do everything 100% of the, like, we can't do things perfect every time. It's just not possible. And we have to make assumptions. Otherwise we can't take a step forward. So like, is part of just your development learning ways that you can get comfortable in that fear.
Well, but you also hit on the being able to, well, I don't agree with the way that you decided to do that. And you can say, well, I gave my rationale. I'm a human. I made my judgment call. Now it's, would you like me to go back and redo it? Because I think that's another little hook is that maybe I was catching this as she was speaking as well. We have this tendency to want to say, I've done it. I've handed it off. And if it's not everything that they need, then I have failed. And definitely, and I think in any in-house or external, there is a tendency to say, I want to check this off my list and be done. I mean, you guys have lived with, I mean, I get what I keep wanting to get stuff done, whether it's, and then you're like, oh, but one more thing. And it's like, oh, so I think that's the other piece is to, you can turn over more stones later, you know, if you're going in with the mindset that given the time, the scale of the decision, the number of assumptions I was making, this felt like a good stopping point. If I go in saying, if I need to do more, I failed, then then you're going to fail and that fear is going to perpetuate. If you go in saying, this is my best shot and this is my best spot to check in, I might be done and that's great, but I might not be done, but I'll have more information. I'll know which stones, which additional stones I'm overturning. And hopefully you're helping your partner realize that this is a collaboration. This isn't throw it back and forth over the fence.
I think follow-ups are inevitable is one thing. And like, there's always going to be something new coming up where they probably have a tweak on their question or a new meeting the next week. So it's kind of like, to your point, you have to be comfortable that it's going to be an ongoing conversation. So it's not a failure, that they're not like, oh, this is exactly what I needed and I'm done with this conversation. Talk to you next month. Yeah, like it's probably not going to happen.
Business decision finalized. I think another thing I've done and I like doing personally is I like grabbing somebody else with context for that analysis and showing them what I've done and see if they can find anything to gut check it. So like, here's the business question I'm trying to answer or the hypothesis, and here's what I've done so far. What holes could you poke in this? And just spending 15 minutes with somebody else sometimes really helps build your confidence to then say, okay, yeah, this is in great shape. We've looked at it. Or it's like, ooh, I didn't think of that. Okay, I'm going to quickly do some additional work around that piece of it. So sometimes that can also be like a second pair of eyes.
I like that.
Could be helpful.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Because when you're working alone, sometimes I do this anyways. You just really get like stuck in your own way of thinking about it. And then you forget like, oh yeah, we could be this whole other way of looking at it that someone else can bring. So
Great question, Lori.
yeah, super great question.
Starting strong.
I wish we knew how to answer it because of like, oh yeah. It's time to step away from the show for a quick word about PIWIC Pro. Tim, tell us about it.
Well, PIWIC Pro has really exploded in popularity and keeps adding new functionality.
They sure have. They've got an easy-to-use interface, a full set of features with capabilities like custom reports, enhanced e-commerce tracking, and a customer data platform.
We love running PIWIC Pro's free plan on the podcast website, but they also have a paid plan that adds scale and some additional features.
Yeah, head over to piwic.pro and check them out for yourself. You can get started with their free plan. That's piwic.pro. And now let's get back to the show. Let's get to our next question.
Hello, this is Cade. I am a lowly analyst who has worked with several of the hosts on the Analytics Power Hour. My question is kind of related towards dashboarding. I have built mini dashboards during my time as an analyst and have gotten advice even from some of the hosts here as well on some of my dashboards. Previously, there's been an episode that has discussed dashboarding, and my question is, how do we get clients to care about their data rather than just saying, here, give me this report, this is what I want because my stakeholders need it? How can we help them build something that is functionally usable that they can use continually in their organization? I feel like it's really easy to get siloed where I am told to build something, I build it, and then never hear back from them again.
So to be clear, Tim, you've helped Cade with dashboarding, and he still has questions. I'm noticing a theme.
Wow.
This is good. What's going to happen is Michael will never be able to use that dastardly Q word ever again, because this will be the one that sort of, removes that adjective.
This is a good question.
It's another good one.
To be fair, and Cade, I'm also a lowly analyst. We've never had a chance to work together, but dashboards are basically things to be thrown into a void. They serve no real business purpose. So just make as many as you can and as pretty. You have to make them really pretty. And then it doesn't matter whoever looks at them. It's just, could they make it into a business development pitch at a later point is, the real value they bring. Okay, who else has a real answer to this
Michael's
question?
on fire.
I just woke up and chose violence. I don't know.
I don't actually like Mo. What is the role of dashboards within Canva?
Ooh, good question.
I find this question quite challenging because I still feel like dashboards are the bane of my existence. And it doesn't matter how much I read, what things I test out, it still just feels like the most frustrating thing ever. And the reason I say that is because there is the Eric Weber school of thought of like, you don't build for a person, you build for like stakeholders and the types of questions they would want to answer. But like, genuinely, sometimes you need to build something very specific and bespoke just to shut a person up and be like, here is the exact thing you asked for. Please don't tell me that my team don't deliver the stuff that you want, because you literally put a set of requirements out and we delivered it for you. And then there is the like bringing the horse to water or whatever, like you build it and then they don't look at it and then you're really frustrated. Can anyone tell that I'm having like a bit of drama with dashboarding at the moment, just based off like my pure tone of voice?
It's not coming through at all. Well, that's good. You're really balancing it out.
And then there is the like, what if this dashboard is cut this way and that dashboard's cut that way? And then people get confused because they're like, this number doesn't match that number. And you're like, because you asked for very bespoke things and therefore they are cut different ways. So the summary is I need everyone else's help on this one, because I am feeling pretty similar to our lovely listener.
I mean, I am teed up to swing at this one, and this was funny because I actually emailed Cade back when he submitted it, because I was like, I literally have a post going live tomorrow called Dashboards Must Die, except long live the performance measurement dashboard. So I think and this came from when I was at Adobe Summit, and I was somewhere dashboards came up. I was talking to an analyst, and it got the immediate, yep, dashboards are where data goes to die. So I think that dashboards, and I absolutely blame BI vendors and then analysts and companies buying into their pitch for it, that dashboards get treated as this grand data democratization thing that, we're going to build this for you and you will have access. Actually, when I started at Search Discovery, there was a really good analyst working with a really good client, and the monthly report was done by building a Data Studio dashboard for the monthly report. And he had to spend a lot of time because it was like the dashboard had to have a narrative, and it was like a monthly report. And it was just like the investment to build. Dashboards take time to build them well. And if you then say, I'm going to build it and make it as my interface to all of the data so that then the business user can answer every question, it will fail horribly. So I think I have a very strong opinions that I think dashboards are fantastic when they are just being used to tightly show how something is performing. If I want to be able to monitor my campaign and I have clearly defined KPIs with targets, and I want a tight single screen, Stephen Few's information dashboard design says dashboards fit on one screen, and the number of platforms out there that say, it's one screen because you have a scroll bar, or it's one screen because you have 18 tabs across the top.
Endless scroll.
And you can put all these filters and you can do drill downs. I'm like, that's not a dashboard. That's teaching them to use an ad hoc analysis tool that you've put some constraints around it. So for me, don't expect that if we give a dashboard with enough features on it, that now the business will go away and they'll be able to self-serve and answer their questions. And if they're not looking at it, it's their fault or it's the dashboard's fault. It's like it's a misaligned expectation. So that's where, if they need to be able to self-service on the data, figure out a way for them to self-service on the data with whatever platform they're using. If there's something that is the performance is being measured and they've done the work to identify clear goals and how they're measuring progress against those goals, and they've set targets, then build a dashboard, but keep it tight. I mean, there can be a couple little filters.
Okay.
On it. So, okay.
I have a follow-up question.
Nope, we're out of time. So I'll just go ahead and play the next question. While I climb down from my soapbox. Okay.
I agree with your soapbox speech. So that is like an interesting place to start from.
What, that you agree with me?
Yes.
Okay. We're all shocked, frankly.
Hashtag quintessential.
I obviously am like in this painful place right now. What is then, because like I said, I do agree. Let's have that as the starting point. What it is then, in your view, the best way to communicate the like, are we on track? Or the like, I'm going to say the I word, insights coming from the dashboard. Like in your dream state, what does that look like? Because someone has to interpret the data and share it.
I don't think insights ever come from dashboards. I think insights rarely come from dashboards.
As someone who was forced to try to generate insights from dashboards and hated my life.
Okay, sorry. Maybe I used the wrong language. Yeah. We want to know every month if we're on track, right? So our dashboard will tell us that. Like, generally speaking, you have your target. It goes, we're hitting it, we're not hitting it. I'm not necessarily expecting the dashboard to answer the why, but when you share we're on track, yes or no, the next question will be why. So how do you best communicate the why?
Okay, if you're on track and the answer is yes, we're on track, and they say why, then the response is, why do you fucking care? You had a plan.
No, it's what did
you had a target.
Yeah.
You hit it. Why? Like, imagine you're going through life.
Fine. What worked? What are the extra opportunities, say, to hit that target even better?
Yeah, I fundamentally think you're fucked if you're down that path. And I think most companies are. So, yeah, I think that's a broken conversation.
Well, I think there needs to be a separation between the dashboard itself and those questions, because I think those questions are great. Like, hey, we're crushing it. How do we crush it harder is a great question. That's not a question to answer in the context of a dashboard. It's a question to answer in the context of an analysis or something like that, where we go.
Okay, but how do you share that? Do you send out ad hoc analysis whenever you like do a deep dive? Do you have a cadence for it? Like, if that is what you're trying to share back with the business, what does good look like there?
This is a can of worms, because I'm recently big fan of statistical process control because of the episode we did with Cedric Chin. So the first thing, I'm riling Tim up so bad right now, I can tell. All right, Tim, go ahead. You're smarter than me anyways.
Well, no, like I actually challenge that. I mean, this is like the biggest. Oh, and Michael, you gave me, like, before we were recording, you gave me shit saying like, and this is why you started.
No. Listen, on this, I actually have. We agree. We just don't ever say it the same way, but we actually do agree on this. So
I mean, I think things are getting thrown to the analyst. Like, I mean, use that simplistic example of here are the results. Just say we're not crushing it. Say that we're missing. And then if the response is, oh, my dashboard showed me that we're missing it, that's a problem. Great. You've actually cleared one good hurdle, objectively and quantitatively shown, even on a dashboard, you're missing it. And then if the business says, okay, analyst, it's your responsibility and your responsibility alone to tell me why. I've now asked that question. Come back to me when you can answer it. That is where analysts are absolutely destined to fail in the long run.
Yeah, but the problem, Tim, is that you don't get very far being a Bartleby the Scrivener around that and just being like, I'd prefer not to, because
no, that's a
literary thing. I did a literary thing.
I mean, I think that's the business needs to have some. I want to talk with them, and
I don't disagree. But the path is convoluted, is all I'm saying.
Tim's not saying to say no.
I'm not saying
Tim's saying like,
no
let's
at
have
all.
a discussion. Because usually it's the business who is the one that's like in charge of the decisions that got us to the place that we're at. So they probably have a lot of insight into why they've made the choices they did over that past whatever time period.
Yeah, and instead of having to look at the data as an analyst and be like, oh, it looks like you did X, Y, Z. It's like, can't you tell me you did X, Y, Z? Yeah, like I don't want to go discover what you did 6 weeks ago by the time I'm giving you my monthly report.
Because then we come back with the analysis and be like, it looks like you did X, Y, Z. Like, yeah, we know we did X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, maybe you just should have told me that before I spent the time.
Well, analysis says don't do that. Next question.
Okay, so hypothetically, we're not asking the analyst to say why, or the analyst will potentially include some type of write-up which has heavy business consultation. And you definitely see companies that do this well, where like product managers or product marketing managers or marketers are getting involved in helping answer the why. The question still stands. How do you best communicate that then to leadership?
it's very organization and situation specific. I think trying to make it and this is not me injecting like a bunch of like, well, now this becomes super complicated in a production. I think the flip side is when you prescribe that it's this way, then you shove everything into it. Even the people who put insights on dashboards, and I mean, there are listeners who are doing that, and oh my God, like, let me guess, you wind up with insights saying that, we missed our target last month, or you have insights that are just noting that a spike happened on a chart, or you actually have something interesting to find, but since you only have a 2-inch by 2-inch square to put the insights, you can't elaborate on it. So like, so many things wrong with that. So I think there are times, because there's even like a why, like the natural question of why is a natural human curious, given a magic wand where it takes zero resources and zero time. I always want to ask why, and somebody immediately gives me the answer. But there's another level of having that back and forth. And then it's like, well, when could you change? What could you change? How much does it matter? Oh, so I could do something in 20 minutes and shoot you an email. Or, hey, we have a status call next week. By the time of that call, you know what? I'll have 2 slides put together that show it to you. I'll email you beforehand. I'll have the charts after. So to me, that is it's a much healthier way. It's like we don't ask when we're going to answer the phone. We answer the phone when the phone rings and we're available, like two factors, and we know who's calling maybe. So like, okay.
I do agree. To some level, what I would say though, what I would say is like, it sounds like, and I could be misparaphrasing, that you share when there's information to be shared, and you ongoing kind of negotiate what the right format for that is. The issue is like when you're dealing with leadership, they have set cadences, they have calendars that are hard to get into. Sometimes you have a meeting once a month and that's your only chance. Like they have an expectation often that there is a regular cadence. And especially in the early days with a new stakeholder, you kind of can't say to them like, hey, I'll flag with you when there's something you need to know. I built you a dashboard, just like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I will absolutely turn that around. So the regular cadence, there is a dashboard that says, here you're doing, because you worked with me to identify what good looks like. That you absolutely 1,000%, that is structured, rigid in whatever cadence. Maybe they're even available on demand, but still in your regular cadence, you pull it up and show it to them. But the difference is they say, oh, but now you need to tell me all the insights about that. If you flip that around and to say, no, in that meeting, we're having a forward-looking discussion about what are you going to do? What questions do you have about it? What are your concerns? What are the risks that you see? What are the things that you hope to actually know and understand by the next time we meet? You're engaging them and saying, what do you want and need to know? And then you're actually answering questions that they are ready to, and that can still be on a regular cadence. I think it is 1,000% broken, and also what happens in 90% of organizations, to say, no, you show up at the weekly report or the monthly, whatever your cadence is, and you're supposed to just deliver magic. And I mean, it even sounds like what you're saying, like, yeah, you know what? I haven't figured out how to make that work. Yeah, because it's not going to work. And I used to do this with agency when I was in an agency as an analyst within a digital agency, and you can make that pivot. It's rough for the first month. I mean, the complaint that would get was you find some stuff, sure, it's low hanging fruit. You found some things, you tell them to do it. Well, then they don't do it for various reasons because it's not actually practical. They don't get around to it. They don't follow through. The next month, you can't say the same thing again. So you say something else. I think
we're saying the same thing though. You would use that regular cadence to understand what questions they want answered the next time. And I would also then be able to answer the questions that they asked the last time, right? Like if that first meeting's tough. But you're not showing up saying, I'm going to deliver you insights. It's we have a good relationship and an understanding.
It's a facilitation tool, is the dashboard. Like, how do you get people to use it? You facilitate a conversation with it, I think, is kind of what we've all gotten to.
Your takeaways are, these are the questions, here's how we're going to answer them. And then the next time you say, as you remember, these were the questions. We could partially answer this one. We couldn't answer this one. We have a test plan to answer this one. Here's the answer to this one. We're having another discussion. we're also tanking on this. Why do you think it is? We think it might be this. I mean, so but you're setting up your plan going forward from the last one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think dashboards aren't for business stakeholders, they're for analysts. Like, in general. Like, I feel like business stakeholders ask for them, but if they ask for them, they think they're going to go look at data and actually analyze it and get an answer. And if I throw it back to Kathleen when she was on the show, like, providing a number is not the same as analytics, right? Like, analysis is a verb of you actually inferring from the data an answer. So, to throw that out there, too. I think it's for analysts.
But I think it's fine for them to look at it and say, is my campaign on track, or is my website delivering what it's supposed to do? And that, and even can I slice it and look at it for mobile versus desktop or whatever a little bit of, but also being clear with them saying, if there's a question you have and you can't answer it, that doesn't need to be add another feature to the dashboard. Like that is where, and the BI tools they are absolutely out there. Some of the digital analytics platforms say, yeah, you teach them how to drag dimensions in. I won't.
Right.
But if you do get to the end of building a dashboard and you have a little extra square on the page, definitely just drop in a pie chart, something nifty. All right.
Well, one other quick thing that Cade mentioned, just we can touch on it quickly, that he said that like gave me a ping in my stomach, which was, I'm told to build these dashboards, which makes me think that he's a little disconnected potentially in this scenario from the stakeholder he's delivering it to. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing you could put on that page that's going to turn out to a successful situation, because it's going to be through conversation and some of the facilitation you were talking about, Julie, moderating that discussion to make sure that whatever makes it into that is worth it and valuable. So get yourself in front of those stakeholders, Cade.
And
get some sharp elbows.
Thank you, Cade, for giving us a question that none of us have any problems with or any historical demons about. So, great job.
Okay.
Unpack your trauma with the Power Hour crew.
Yeah, we're on pace to get through like 4 questions at this point. So, I mean, we're really doing it. All right, let's do our next question.
Hey, Analytics Power Hour crew. This is Rusty Raymer. I have a question for you. I think at some point everybody wrestles with the career decision to work for an agency, a consulting firm, or the brand/client, etc. While your examples and opinions of the various topics you've covered on the show often reflect those different experiences that each of you have had, I don't know that I have ever heard an episode where the differences of working in those different positions has been explicitly compared and contrasted. So what's it like working at an agency versus a consulting firm versus the client? I would love to hear your collective experiences on the topic, and even perhaps the differences in your experience with small, mid, and large-size versions of those different business types.
Ooh.
I'm not going first this time.
That was a great question from Rusty.
It was a really good question.
The first question, if we want to break it down, is agency versus consultancy, which is an interesting one, I think. And sometimes those words are kind of interchanged, but I think that if you're getting specific about it, that they do mean different things. Do we want to start there?
I'm not going to say anything that we can publish.
Well, walking down memory lane, and Michael and I, we don't remember which coast it was on. It was definitely at an eMetrics, where I had a contention with Michael that it was impossible to be successful as an analyst within an agency. Yeah. So defining an agency
eMetrics
as
New
a
York,
creative agency or a media agency or a digital agency, because the incentive structure is the agency's incentive is show success to get more money. And so you are running uphill so hard. So then there are company, and I'll name like Further is one that is like an analytics agency. There's much more of, to me, a consultancy where it is like helping with the data piece. So that's the distinction. Michael, and I think we've decided that my memory is correct on this, that you said, no, I think we can be successful. And like a month later you were gone.
Well, it wasn't that fast, but there was a period of time. I was pretty new back into the agency world. And so I had like a plan I was trying to do. And then about a year later, I was like, yeah, Tim, you're right. It's not possible. So yeah,
and you went to Search Discovery, which was much more consultancy.
Yeah. And we built out the consulting model at Search Discovery, which more like a how do we solve business problems as opposed to support paid search, or whatever it is that agencies do. And I think, that's one aspect of it. I think the other things are like working across, consulting firms versus, client companies. And Tim, I know you've got a lot of experience with Val. You've got a lot of experience with that. Mo, you too. I don't have any recent experience with that. Last time I worked at an industry company was 2010 or something, 11, something like that. So somebody else can answer how it's different than a consulting firm.
I'll say that on this side, because I had 2 in-house roles in digital analytics before I was on the consulting side. And the one thing that I miss is that I don't get to see always where the questions come from, like those early stage water cooler, mention it in the last 5 minutes of a meeting before it becomes something that someone would talk to their agency partners about. And then I also kind of miss sometimes the accountability on the back end. So like after you deliver your analysis and you give your recommendations when you're on the consulting side, like it's kind of like job done. And you check in on that and you cross your fingers and you hope that some of that sees the light of day and it all comes together. But being in-house and being accountable for those outcomes, sometimes I really enjoyed that pressure because like you're the team or the person or a part of a group that's picking that path forward for the business. And so I enjoyed some of that accountability because you don't always see it. But it is nice to not have to be a part of the politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just kind of pop some popcorn while you watch all that unfold.
Like, as a consultant, I'll let y'all just argue about that.
I'm just going to go on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait it out.
But the flip side is you don't have the time and the opportunity to sort of work the not necessarily play the politics, but figure out, find your partners who you can go and kind of play with and do cool stuff and kind of avoid the other ones. You're kind of stuck with the hand that you're dealt in consultancies a lot. And I certainly, there have been times where I thought, boy, like my primary contact is like making me run through quicksand to do this. If I could just talk to the person on the other side or talk to the person on the other side without them in the room, without the intermediary in the room, I think we'd be doing, phenomenal things. So I feel like consultancy, you're often running with a couple of kind of lead boots. One may be the constraints of the consultancy you're working in and what their motivations and incentives are. And the next is whatever their entry point is. And you're like, the real value would be over there. Whereas inside with a company, and Mo, this is where you can be like, yeah, right, Tim, you're seeing the grass is greener on the other side. You may still have the people who are problems, but you can also a little easier to get the direct lines because you've got a year or 2 years that you'll be working with them, not, the end of this agreement when we have to sign a new engagement to find them.
Conversely, though, you're going to be working with those people as long as you stay at the company. So if they're really difficult, they're staying in your life and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like you get to deliver it and be like, job's done.
The joy of not firing a client. You don't have to fire clients. You just don't re-up with them because contracts are rarely 5-year contracts. You just say, yeah, you know what? My bill rate, I'm just tripling it. In which case I would suck it up.
One thing I will say that I actually really miss about agency, and when I say agency, I mean analytics agency because I didn't work at another type of agency, is the pressure. I actually think that like sometimes pressure is a good thing, and especially a good thing for an analyst. And like, our first question from Laurie is like, sometimes you have to stop because like you don't have any more time. And I feel like when you're in-house, one thing that I struggle with is like you can push back and be like, I need more time, or like we're not going to get to that this season or whatever. And like the deadline can move. And I actually don't always think that's a good thing. Sometimes it is absolutely like a blessing, but sometimes it's also a curse because you're like, I don't know, you want people to kind of be like motivated and fired up and that sort of thing, but they don't necessarily have the pressure there.
Yeah. This is why, Mo, it seems like you're always just kind of like, where should I spend my time? I have like so things are moving so slow that I just,
yeah.
you know what? I'm gonna turn over a few extra stones because I don't want to knock off at 3 this afternoon.
I don't want to skip over the other part of Rusty's question, which is also dealing with sort of like the relative size of those organizations, because I think that actually has a pretty big impact as well. When you're working in a small company or a mid-sized company versus like a really large company, it can have a very different feel and impact, and actually on both the consulting agency side as well as industry side. And I don't know, we spend a lot of time at Stacked Analytics like thinking about like, why do we like this client so much versus maybe some other clients, and what are the attributes and what is the nature of this relationship that's like making it feel like such a good
Have you
thing.
thought maybe you should just be like delivering work instead of, pondering the
Well,
relationship?
I think what our clients are paying us for is to ponder these things.
Whoa. Shots
Wow,
fired.
Tim. Just wow. He starts up a competitor and then just goes right after us. It's crazy. Never said a bad word.
But Michael, can I talk about this like large, small thing?
Yeah.
One thing I have noticed, because obviously Canva has grown in size. When I was there, we were a bit under 500 people. Now we're over 4,000. And the data science field is like hundreds of people. One of the things I've noticed that has actually been really like difficult to manage is like you have to bring more people in the room constantly. So like we were doing analysis on something and it's like, oh, well, you got to get someone from this department and someone from that department and the lead analyst from that department to make sure we've like covered all the angles. And suddenly like we were in a working group call with like 12 data scientists. And I'm like, we don't need this many people. Like in my mind, I'm calculating the hourly rate of these 12 data scientists being like, can we just have like 2 or 3 people work on this and then everyone else can QA it?
Yeah.
Like, and that stuff gets really difficult, like the deconflicting as you get bigger.
Larger organizations have this scaling problem, where it's you get more and more specialized, right, in terms of like what your role is, what you cover. Whereas in a smaller org, you're able to wear lots of different hats and potentially move around to lots of different problems, even if it's not necessarily like your main skill set. It's sort of like, well, you're the best we've got, so figure out and do what you can with it. And then later on in life, we've got a PhD whose dissertation was basically this problem, so they'll touch it. You don't need to worry about it. That kind of stuff happens. Yeah,
and that's a large company that's young, like Mo, like yours is like kind of digital first. Like you take the large companies, like when I worked for a big insurance company that had been around for 100 years and they had acquired these and that, and like the sort of the calcification within those. And I think the same is for large, consultancies, the big ones have a very sort of structured, this is the way that we work. And I have yet to find an analyst. A lot of times it's analysts who were at another company that got snapped up and acquired into those larger consultancies. And they're like, this is just brutal. And like bureaucracy is sort of an oversimplification of what it is. I was talking to somebody who worked at Google even, who was saying, I'm supposed to do this thing. It's clearly defined, and I need to reach out to this other team. And it's the same thing, Mo. She said, by the time we get to the meeting, there are 17 people in there, and there's a combination of people who have touched different systems to CYA. I need to bring, I'm coming, then I need my other expert to come along and listen as well. And 3 people are working. My time when I was at the insurance company, it was like, I was like, could we just, if we got 3 people pointed in the right direction and let them go, we could get this done. Instead, we have piled so much shit on it that it will take it a year and a half to do a tiny little thing. So I know I have a bias towards the smaller, like I get to a few hundred and then I start to, or I get to, 5. I'm struggling.
Yeah, we've no more co-hosts on the podcast, or else Tim's not going to be able to handle it.
I'll lose it. I remember my first job out of college, I worked at a super small boutique market research firm. And I just thought like, that's the way market research was done. That's the way you interact with clients. And I went to TNS, which is a WPP, and it could not have been more night and day. And I lasted 7 months at that second large agency. It was not a good fit for me. But I will say that then I went to UBS later, which is like, over 60,000 people. And I loved like what you were talking about, Mo, with some of the networking. Like, cause like if someone told me no, I would literally just scroll through Active Directory to find people's job titles who might sympathize with my cause, put a meeting on their calendar and be like, hey, I didn't even know if they spoke English half the time. I was like, let's just, maybe they'll see that I'm from, New York and assume that we can communicate in this meeting. And, sometimes that was how I got things done.
I love that. I love that.
That's amazing, Val. Living out the better to get forgiveness than it is to get permission mentality. That's awesome.
Love it.
All right. Why don't we move on to our next question?
Hi, this is Ricky Messick from Nashville, Tennessee. With AI, it seems now more than ever we need to improve in the art of asking good questions. I see two different audiences for these questions. For humans, business stakeholders, customers, coworkers, and for AI, like prompt engineering. So how do we get better at asking good questions? Bonus, how do I ask good questions as I get older, more crotchety, and less inquisitive? This might be directed a little bit more at Tim, but love you, Tim.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy.
Ricky.
No, Val, where's your one-liner about? No.
The quintessential analyst?
No, it's like, yeah, Ricky used to work with Tim, and he still has questions. No.
Ricky used to work with Tim, and he got even crankier because of it.
Yeah.
My work here was done.
Well,
he was this laid-back, chill guy, and I was getting crankier.
Well, Ricky, I'm glad you asked. I always viewed this as sort of a volume game, just really pepper them with everything you can think of, and something will stick. No, I'm sorry. It's the joke answer first.
I don't know. I guess, okay. Yes, I get with the rise of AI, we need to ask better questions, right? And like Ricky points out with prompt engineering, it's like specificity and good instructions are even more important. But like, is it really any different? Like, haven't we always been on this kind of evolution to try and get our stakeholders to ask better questions? Like, maybe AI is like putting a boot up our backside, but like, I would say I'm constantly working with stakeholders to be like, how do we get rid of the lo-fi stuff and answer like the most burning, interesting questions for the business? And like, how do I help stakeholders get there instead of saying like, can I have, to revert to earlier, this dashboard with this cut or this filter? Like, and I don't know, I feel like Taylor, the episode we did with Taylor recently, Taylor Guthrie Bunacore on asking better questions, was like such a good way of thinking about the type of questions and the way we engage our stakeholders. I don't know, Tim is like chomping to like get in here and, I thought you were like.
No. I think that's great. I mean, I think on the one hand, it doesn't change. I think the prompt engineering, and Michael, I think has kind of been of the five of us, the most sort of playing and trying and exploring. And I was a little slow, but now I feel like I've been there is a science to prompt engineering, and lots of people have written, how to get better answers out of AI. And I think there are some kind of tactical techniques for that. So there's
like some things to it.
Yeah. Pretend you are a whatever. What do you need to know? Whatever. So that's like, okay, you can go Google how to do, prompt engineering. I think, Mo, I'm largely with you that to me, it just comes back to curiosity and the business focus, that asking, we talk about like, what are you trying to achieve? Or like, what's keeping you up at night? Channeling, John Lovett. Like, I don't think somebody's really agonizing they don't have a dashboard with the click-through rate in a timely fashion. They're thinking about, how do I make my email more effective? Well, now my question is like, well, what is it you're expecting email to do? So to me, there's like a hand in hand with, you've got to stay curious, and you've also got to be comfortable knowing that you shouldn't have the answers. I think that's where analysts will lock up saying, I don't want to ask that question. It's a dumb question. Which, one other aside, Malcolm Gladwell, it was on his revisionist history feed, but it was on I'll put it in the show notes. He was talking about his father and how his father felt he was an expert on super advanced mathematics, the Bible, and a third thing. And he said he didn't think he was an expert on anything else. And he would just assume that he was the dumber person in any conversation and would ask questions. And then Gladwell went on to say, and then if he was talking, and gardening, it's like if he was talking to somebody who knew something about some type of flower, he would assume that person knew more than he did as well. And Malcolm Gladwell, who I've got some qualms with occasionally, but I can't fault his mind. Like when he speaks and in extemporaneously or in conversation, he's just curious, which means he asks questions, which means the people he's asking questions of want to answer them. So I don't know. I think it goes to being curious and not feeling like you are asking a dumb question, and then you'll ask good questions.
And if you feel stuck too of like, I know I should ask more, I feel like it's really important to realize what you're trying to ask more about is probably context around the question. Like, you don't have to just think of random other bespoke questions. Like, to get deeper information, it's okay to ask more about the background, where they got the question from. Oh, is that coming from so-and-so leader you know the name of? Like, it's okay to kind of just like pull at some threads to get like that connective information. And I do think that is helpful, because even going back to the AI prompt stuff, you guys were just saying, like, to be really good at that, you have to give the AI enough context to better answer your question. So same thing when you're talking to a stakeholder or a client, if you're trying to get them to ask you better questions, or you're trying to clarify a question that they've asked you to give a more helpful answer, you're like pulling on that context piece of, can I get some more background? Can I get some helpful like hints around where the heck this came from? Who's actually looking for this answer? So then you can better go serve the client or stakeholder.
Yeah.
And Taylor did say that in episode 240, there was you pulled that one out. And I was like, oh, that was coming from the discussion with Taylor. Like, what if you're like, it's dead air and I don't have any more questions? And there was a great discussion you guys had on like what to do with that. Oh yeah. Episode 240. Like,
yeah, that's a good one.
Oh yeah. Her golden question where me and Mo both gasped, like that was amazing. She's like, yeah, is there anything you feel like I should be asking you? Which is a great
Which
one.
I immediately used in the client meeting like the next week, and people were like, ooh. Like there were oohs in the room.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an ooh
Audible
kind of
oohs.
meeting, and there were oohs.
Ooh. But it is interesting, because I do think sometimes when like developing this as a skill set, it is sort of like there are tactics you can learn. So sort of like prompt engineering, where you kind of learn like, okay, here's how I navigate to get the AI to produce the result I want. People aren't obviously the same as an AI, but you can learn different things that actually give you a leg up, like those types of questions, which are just so fabulous in their design. And I think another one from that same episode was, Val, the continuum questions, which I think you talked about how you used one. And then I was like, I'm using that. So I used that in a one-on-one right after that. And it surfaced all this incredible discussion with a person, which we would have never gotten into if I just asked like, hey, how you doing? So it was like, give me how you on a scale of 1 to 10. Oh, interesting. What's driving that number? It's incredible. And so like, that's where learning a skill around some of those things and like picking up some of those skills then gives you an enhanced capability. And again, I think with people, we have to be careful not to be cynical about it, but they're profound in their ability to do that. So I'm always looking for those, like how to do that better, or how to pick up new ways of kind of like building questions. I remember Will Reynolds, who's the founder of Seer Interactive, he has a huge list of client questions he's gathered over the years, which he's shared with us at one point, and probably I think he shared out. We'll put it in the show notes. But it's a great set of questions, and you put some of those in there, and they're just like those ones where it's like, in having conversations with people, asking the right question can really put you in a whole different category in people's minds, because they're like, wow, people don't often ask that, or they don't think to ask like that. And those are things that just can set you apart. It's hard to remember them all. So I'm thankful to Will. He's put a lot of work over the years into putting, it's a pretty big list. You can't obviously ask every question in that list. So you kind of like, what I do sometimes is I go through that list before a phone call, and I pick out 2 or 3 I'd like to try out, and then I pull them into the conversation. So thanks, Will.
I've also had when having a conversation, sometimes thought, what would I need to know that I could best represent that person if they weren't here in the context of what I'm trying to learn. Like, I want to be making decisions. I mean, this kind of goes back to Lori's question as well. Like, if I'm going to be trying to figure out which stones I should most unturn, I need to be able to represent them as best I can comfortably. What do I need to know to do that? And it's not so much that you're trying to play the game to become them, but it does sort of force a degree of kind of empathy of, I really want to understand where they're coming from. What do I need to know to actually understand that? Another kind of mindset.
All right. We're having such a blast. We're making a game time decision. We're going to do a second episode so that we can keep going over these questions, because we're obviously not getting to them fast enough. And they're awesome. They're awesome questions. And some of the answers are okay too. But this is so much fun. And I hope as you're listening, you're having fun too. We would love to hear from you. Even if it's not in this format, we love your questions. You can tell we love your questions because we're doing a whole show with some of your questions. So please feel free to reach out to us. The best way to reach out is either through the Measure Slack group, where a lot of us are, our LinkedIn page, and you can also get it to us via email at contact@analyticshour.io. And, well, this is fun. Like Julie, Val, Tim, Mo, like... I'm not the only one, right? Like, this is...
Yeah. A couple of us are drinking this time, just like the old times.
So we're gonna wrap up, and obviously, no show would be complete without a huge thank you to Josh Crowhurst, our producer. Thank you, Josh, for everything you do for the show. We look forward to getting back to all these submitted questions in a future episode, and we've had a blast. So thank you all so much for submitting them. Thank you, Julie, Tim, Val, Mo, for being a part of this episode, answering these questions. So remember, whether you've got questions or whether you've got answers, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
I love Venn diagrams. It's just something about those 3 circles and the analysis about where there is the intersection, right?
And I used to have something called the EIEIO, but I forgot what the letters stood for. And so it's really not useful. I was so proud of myself. I have a slide somewhere from like 10, 12 years ago where I spelled out what the EIEIO was. And it was
You
awesome,
have to make it up on the spot.
Unfortunately, it was lost to me.
Okay.
No, I tried earlier to remember what it was, but I feel like if I say anything about anything I've ever done, Tim will be like, that was from like thousands of years ago, you fucker. And then, why did you make me sound like it? Only because the last time I did that, that's exactly what you said. So I'm a little gun shy, you know.
You are in a mood today, Michael, and I love it.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I am. All right, we're gonna do a show. Here we go.
I wish I had more coffee.
Me too. I wish I
And
had.
maybe an 8 a.m. wine. You never know.
All right.
No, I said, I wish for this episode we were all together in person, like sitting at a bar. How fun that would be.
That would be fun. Everyone get on a plane to Australia.
Done.
Michael, I'll buy you a small cheval burger next time you're in Chicago if you say curious like a cat, like Will Ferrell doing Harry Carey.
If the moon was made of cheese, would you eat it?
I know I would.
I know I would. I'm just curious. I'm curious like a cat. Oh, brother.
This is why we can't. This is why we can't all be on a show together.
I just got in trouble from Mo. Misbehaving.
Hi there, my name is Seymour Butts and I'm calling from deep inside an AI model. My question is for Tim. What is your recommendation for someone who's just starting out learning R? I don't have enough time to do a full boot camp, but I don't know enough about potential use cases to dive into it with a work problem in mind. Also, what the fuck is up with the rock flag? It was weird enough when you did it and now you're making other people do it too. Not cool, bro. Not cool.
Rock flag and just find the time. Learn R. Do your fucking job.